Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. My name is Marcus Thompson. At the time, I was a relatively new senior project manager at Continental Energy, working in the operations division based in Houston, Texas. This deployment came at the worst possible time for me to be anywhere other than home with my wife, because she was pregnant and the baby was due sometime during this assignment. I tried to get out of the deployment, but the company would not accept that decision. Catherine and I had been married for almost 6 years. Most of them were good years. The difficult ones happened when I had to travel for business and she stayed home alone. Catherine and I weren't childhood sweethearts or lifelong friends. We met at the DMV one day when I was registering my car and she was renewing her license. We sat next to each other, waiting for our numbers to be called, and started chatting. One thing led to another, and pretty soon we exchanged phone numbers. A week later we had our first date, and a month after that we became intimate. Catherine wasn't a striking beauty, but she had a classic elegance that made my heart race. She could just look at me and I'd feel completely captivated. Her figure was timeless too. Most men would notice any woman with her grace, and I watched people turn their heads as she walked by. At first, I felt proud watching them admire her, but eventually it became tiresome. I began to think of them as intrusive, seeing her only as an object of desire. I realized that was something I had to accept. Catherine, on the other hand, took it all in stride. "Let them look, honey," she'd say with a smile. "It's no big deal. As they say, it's okay to look, but better not to touch." You bet they better not touch. I'd think every time she said that. She worked very hard to maintain her appearance. I was helping her with that commitment. We spent 3 nights a week at the gym, running in Memorial Park, hiking. We even monitored our diet carefully. I'd forgotten the last time I'd eaten red meat, following her lead on healthy living. Watching her get dressed each morning, or better yet, watching her prepare for bed, was always mesmerizing to me. Every time she moved with that natural grace, my heart would race, and I never grew tired of it. When the deployment began, I heard my supervisor say, "I give you my personal guarantee that I will do everything in my power to get you home before the baby is born." And he did. He arranged for me to be on the first flight back to Houston at the end of the project. I packed my things and was about to board the plane when I called Catherine. She told me that she thought she was going to be hospitalized in the next couple of days. "Then the timing must be perfect because I'm on my way home," I told her. We ended the conversation with "I love you." It was dusk. I was being driven to the airport when a deer ran out into the road in front of us. My driver swerved to avoid it, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in a Denver General Hospital. My right arm, right leg, 3 ribs on my right side were broken, and my right lung had collapsed. I was so disoriented that I didn't realize who or where I was. As I began to regain clarity, I started asking questions. "How long have I been here?" I asked my nurse. "5 days. Is my wife here?" "No, sir." "Where is she?" "She wasn't able to travel here, sir. But your company notified her just after you arrived, so she knows what happened." "Where's my phone?" "She found it among my personal belongings, and I called Catherine." "Are you okay?" were her first words. "Don't worry about me. How are you and the baby?" She began to cry. "We lost the baby, Marcus. I'm so sorry." I was too stunned to speak. Finally, I asked, "Are you okay?" "I think so, yes. I'm home, but they don't want me traveling, or I'd be with you." "What happened?" I asked. "No one knows for sure. Everything seemed to be fine until I heard one of the nurses say, 'Oh no,' and then everyone got very concerned. I still don't understand everything, but they tried to explain that it was something with the umbilical cord." "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked. There was a long silence as we both struggled with our thoughts and emotions. "Physically, I'm fine, but emotionally I'm devastated," she said. "When are you coming home?" "I don't know. They haven't given me any timeline. Do you want me to try to come over? No. Stay there and take care of yourself. 2 weeks later, I was flown home on a medical transport. Catherine met me and traveled with me to Houston Methodist Hospital. She was still emotionally fragile, but our time together seemed to help us both heal. I asked her if she had named the baby. Yes, I named her Hope. At those words, we both cried. I was in the hospital for another 2 weeks before I was discharged on modified duties. Modified duties usually meant that you didn't have to travel for fieldwork. This would be very challenging because my arm and leg were still in casts. It took a few more weeks before they were removed. Time passed, and everything was progressing smoothly in both our marriage and my career. 2 years after we lost our child, we were transferred to Portland, Oregon. We spent 3 years there, traveling throughout the Pacific Northwest. There I was promoted to Regional Operations Manager. After 3 years, we were transferred to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Being a regional manager, we were given executive housing. The accommodations were much nicer than standard employee housing, and they had garages, not just carports. Standard housing was for project managers and below. Executive housing included regional managers and above. When we moved into our home in Milwaukee, all the things we had taken with us to Portland were shipped back. We unpacked those boxes as well as the boxes we had stored and not taken with us. The boxes were stacked in each room. Catherine went to the Corporate Wives Club to attend an orientation meeting. There she could meet other wives and develop new friendships. While she was gone, I stayed in our house unpacking and organizing things. Using a box cutter, I opened one of the many boxes and began to remove items from it. It was a box we had stored things in while we were in Portland. About halfway down was a small wooden box that I didn't remember seeing before. I placed it on top of the stack of boxes and opened it.my life changed forever. There was a small stack of envelopes with a pink ribbon around them. I pulled the ribbon away and picked up the top envelope. It was unsealed, and I opened it. Inside was an official document labeled Birth Certificate. As I looked at the document, my mind began to cloud over. It stated that a baby girl weighing 7 pounds, 6 ounces, and 19 inches long was born alive, and it included the date. It was the same date Catherine had told me our baby was stillborn. The baby was named Hope. It went on to say that the mother's name was Catherine Jane Thompson, née Morrison. Where the father's name was listed, there was a note that said, unknown. At the bottom of the certificate were 2 small inked footprints. Staggering, I literally fell onto the couch and stared at the document for a long time. I left it on the couch, stood up, and walked over to the stack of envelopes. I picked up the next envelope. 2 was unsealed. I pulled out a multi-page document. It was an adoption certificate. I read it several times. The essence of it was that a child named Hope, born to Catherine Thompson, had been given up for adoption, and all parental rights had been relinquished. It went on to say that since the identity of the biological father is unknown, his permission is not required. It also stated that the name and location of the adoptive family must remain confidential, and absolutely no contact between the adoptive family and Mrs. Thompson was allowed. I looked through the rest of the packet, and it was mostly letters from me while I was in Denver. I was in total shock. This had to be the biggest deception in the history of deceptions. I couldn't stop asking myself questions. This kind of thing doesn't happen overnight, it has to be planned, or so I thought. If she thought I was coming back for the birth, then did that mean she was already planning the adoption? Father unknown. If I wasn't the father, who was? Obviously, even she didn't know. We were married for 6 years. How many men had she been with in that time? The thought made me feel sick. I managed to regain my composure enough to put everything back in its proper place. I even repacked and taped up the box that contained everything. It was as I was taping up the box that I saw the inscription, Catherine's papers and childhood memories, written in marker on 4 sides. If I had seen that, I definitely wouldn't have opened it. She had to know that even in marriage, we need personal space and private thoughts. I rearranged a few other boxes and put the box among them, trying to pretend I hadn't seen it. I went outside to sit on the back deck and get some fresh air because I felt suffocated inside. What am I supposed to do now? How do I even approach this? I was at a complete loss. There was no clear thought in my head about where to go or how to proceed. I needed advice. If I went to my parents, they would be furious and try to confront Catherine. I was their only child and therefore their only hope. I realized the irony, hope for a grandchild. I could have gone to her parents, but that prospect didn't inspire confidence. We had no close friends. The corporate lifestyle and meeting different people were hard on both family and friendship. I was still there when she got home. She found me on the deck. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, kissing my cheek. "How much have you gotten done?" "Enough," I said rather abruptly. I was rarely brief or curt when talking to her, so I could feel her studying me. She stayed there for a few more minutes before going inside. It must have been another hour before I entered the house. The box with Catherine's papers and childhood memories was gone. "We've been invited to a welcome wagon meeting on Saturday," she said. "The Bradleys from Portland are here. Do you remember them?" "Not really. He was a safety manager and I played bridge with her. Their names were Stephen and Jennifer." "Oh yes, I remember." She walked over to me. "Are you okay? Did something happen? Is something wrong?" "You bet there's something wrong, and I intend to find out what it is," I thought. "No, I'm just a little out of sorts today, I guess." "Okay, what would you like for dinner? Or would you prefer to go to the executive club?" "I'm not hungry. I think I'll lie down." I did, fully clothed on our bed. Sometime before she joined me, I fell asleep. It must have been late because when I looked at the clock, I was still awake at 1 o'clock in the morning. I slept until 9 o'clock, which rarely happened to me. I took a shower and went downstairs. She made coffee and offered breakfast. "No thanks, just coffee," I said, another rarity. I usually had a full breakfast. She sat down across from me. "Okay, there's something wrong. Tell me, and maybe I can help." "I just have a lot to think about," I said. Got up, took my coffee to the sink, poured it out, and headed for the garage. "You know I'm here when you need me," she said as I left. I drove up to the country club, parked the car, and headed to the 19th hole, where there was a bar and restaurant at the end of the golf course. I ordered 2 eggs over medium and corned beef hash. I even had a rare cup of regular coffee. This used to be my favorite breakfast until Catherine changed my eating habits. Beef in any form was an absolute no-no for her, but I ordered it anyway. I managed to eat most of it and sat on the deck while the golfers finished the 18th hole and went inside. When I got home, it was mid-afternoon. She had made significant progress unpacking boxes and organizing the house. I looked around and wondered what it would be like to have a 5-year-old daughter running around. I barely made it to the bathroom before I lost my scrambled eggs and hash browns. I was still leaning over the toilet when I felt her hand on my back. Suddenly, I couldn't stand her touch. "Get away from me!" I almost shouted before I leaned back over and lost more of my breakfast. I haven't been sick like this in years. Not since I got drunk at my high school prom. When I finished, I went upstairs, rinsed my mouth, and brushed my teeth. She was sitting in the living room with a tissue in her hand. She looked like she'd been crying. She watched me walk past her and head into the garage again. I was backing up when she appeared in the rearview mirror. "I can't help you if I don't know what's wrong," she said as I continued to back away. She saw that I wasn't going to stop, and she moved out of the way. I went to my office and sat at my desk, trying to work, but my heart wasn't in it. When I got home, it was past midnight. She was lying in bed reading. I undressed and took a shower. "I'll sleep downstairs," I announced as I walked out and closed the door. I had just turned on the TV and was getting comfortable on the couch when she walked in, grabbed the remote, turned off the TV, and stared at me. "Cut this out. Tell me what's wrong, and I'll either help you or leave." "I haven't done anything wrong," So I won't tolerate you treating me this way when I'm trying to help, or having to get out of your way when you try to run me down with the car. I walked over to her, took the remote from her hands, and turned the TV back on. Have a safe trip, I said. She left less than an hour later. We never talked to each other like that, and she never threatened to leave, let alone actually do so. I got up and started looking for the box. I found it in the basement under some other boxes. I opened it, found the small wooden box, pulled out the birth certificate and adoption papers, made copies of them, and put everything back where it belonged. Since she was gone, I slept in our bed. On Monday morning, I talked to my supervisor and told him my story. I even showed him the documents. He was as shocked as I was. I had been under his management for less than a month, so he hadn't really gotten to know me yet. He was probably worried that he had a problematic employee on his hands. What do you plan to do? He asked me. I'm not sure. Did she say where she was going when she left? No, sir. But she didn't take all her things, especially that box. There was a pause before I spoke again. I was thinking of trying to find my daughter, if she is my daughter, and proceed from there. It would be virtually impossible. In adoption cases, confidentiality is very important to both parties, he said. I understand, but I have to do something. I have to start somewhere, and I don't trust her to tell me the truth anymore. Then I literally jumped up. Oh my God. I have an idea. Can I have the day off? Sure. I left his office quickly and drove home. I opened the box, pulled out the wooden box, and dumped the contents on the floor. There was a pacifier in there, a pacifier Hope must have used before she was taken. I put the box back together, placed the pacifier in a clear plastic bag, and sealed it. I got on the internet trying to find a DNA lab in the area. There was one in downtown Milwaukee. I went into the bathroom, but all of Catherine's things were gone. I rummaged through the cabinet under the sink, found her old hairbrush, put it in another plastic bag along with the bag that held the pacifier, and drove quickly to Milwaukee. I held out the pacifier to the technician, whose name was Patricia, and she looked at it. It's been a long time, so there may not be any DNA left on it, but we can try, she said. She looked at the hairbrush and pulled a few hairs out of it. There would be no problem with that. Then she asked me to spit in a bottle. We'll call you in about 3 weeks, she said. I went back home. I didn't hear from Catherine for another whole day. Hi, I said when she called. Are you feeling better? Better than what? Better than you were a couple of days ago. No, same as before. So it's still not safe for me to come home? No, it isn't. Try again in 3 weeks. Why 3 weeks exactly? By then I should know if I'm going to kill you or just divorce you. I ended the conversation. The phone immediately rang, and I ignored it. The next day when I got home, Catherine was already there. She met my car as I pulled up to the house. She was furious. What do you mean you're going to either kill me or divorce me? Exactly what I said. I think I deserve an explanation, she said. Me too. About what? She asked. We were still in the driveway. We weren't yelling, but we certainly weren't behaving the way a corporate executive and his wife are supposed to behave. You mean you don't need to explain anything? I asked. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So there's no hope for us? I said, putting as much emphasis as possible on the word hope. What do you mean there's no hope for us? What have I done? Then it hit her. Oh my God, no, please no. I'll be back in an hour, and you'd better not be here. I'll leave for work in the morning at 6:30. I'll be back at 5 o'clock. By then, all your stuff should be out of this house. I left. I came back exactly an hour later and she was gone, and so was the box and some of her things. She tried to call that night, but after the first call, I blocked her number. The rest of the night passed quietly. At exactly 6:30 a.m., I was in the car and opening the garage door. There was Catherine standing in the rearview mirror again. I slowly backed up. It was very tempting to continue, but I resisted. Can we at least talk? She asked as I continued in reverse. Please. Her hands rested on the trunk lid, and she moved backward with the car. I didn't answer. A van was parked outside with 3 men sitting in the cab. I was already halfway down the driveway, and the car was still moving. I saw the men get out of the truck, run up to her, and pull her away from behind my car. I didn't know whether to be relieved or concerned that they had intervened. When I got home in the evening, the house was almost empty. She had taken almost all the furniture. True, she left my favorite chair and a bedroom set for guests. She also left the everyday dishes and a few pots and pans. She took the good china and silver and other items that I didn't care about. The next morning, I called my office to let them know I would be late. I then called corporate housing and arranged for temporary furniture to be brought to my house. I also called the credit union, our stockbroker, the insurance company, and anyone else I could think of, handling those mundane housekeeping things that are usually associated with divorce. I then made an appointment with a corporate attorney. I knew they were not authorized to represent me in family court, but they could advise me. They confirmed what I suspected. She would get half. We lived in corporate housing, so we didn't own a house, but we had enough equity to buy one if we wanted to. Both our cars were paid off. We bought them in Portland, much cheaper than we would have paid in the States for the same cars. I went to my office. My supervisor talked to me for a while and told me to take whatever reasonable time I needed to get myself together and keep him informed of my progress or lack thereof. My life continued for a couple more weeks. I went to work, did my chores, mowed the lawn, washed and maintained my car. One morning, the phone rang. Hello, I answered. Is this Mr. Marcus Thompson? It is. This is Patricia from the DNA Analysis Center. A few weeks ago, you gave us some samples to test. Yes, that's right. Well, the results are in, and you can come in and review them. Can't you just tell me now? No, sir, I can't. We can either mail them to the address you gave us or show them to you in person. We have no way to verify over the phone that you are who you say you are. We have to see identification. We can mail the results because, as you may recall, we asked you for ID when you were here, and we were able to verify your address. I'll be there as soon as I can. I walked through their door, introduced myself, and asked for Patricia. She came out and we shook hands. She asked to see my identification. Come with me, please, she said. I followed her into a small room. She asked me to wait. She left and came back a couple of minutes later. She handed me the pacifier and then spoke. Sample A is yours. Sample B is from the hair you gave us, and sample C is from the pacifier. We were able to determine that samples B and C are positively related. Sample A is not related to either B or C. Thanks, I said. I took the pacifier, put it in my pocket, took the papers and left. I got into my car. At least I didn't have a daughter calling some other man daddy. But someone else did. The corporate attorney was not authorized to recommend specific law firms or attorneys, but the attorney I spoke with was able to provide me with a list of approved attorneys and firms. The next day, I started calling them. I made 6 appointments. At the 3rd appointment, I found my advocate. He was a retired corporate attorney and despised cheating spouses, both wives and husbands. I spent over an hour telling him my story. 35 years I've been practicing law, and this is the most calculated and selfish case I've ever seen. She must have ice water in her veins where there should be blood. Too bad the courts here almost always side with the wife, regardless of the circumstances of the divorce. I can almost guarantee that they will side with your wife in this case as well. It's almost as if they feel they have to protect the woman no matter how innocent the man is. When I got home, it was late. There was a letter in the mailbox. It was from Catherine. Marcus, 3 weeks are up. Catherine. Short and to the point. The return address was her parents' address in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Called her. Hi, Marcus, she said. I won't discuss it over the phone, and I'm certainly not flying to Pennsylvania, so I guess you'll have to come here. If you mean Milwaukee, I'm already here. I sent a letter last week when I was there. I'll be at the house at 6:30. Come over then, I told her. She hung up. I didn't make any special arrangements, no drinks, no appetizers, nothing. This was supposed to be a business meeting. I put the DNA documents and my copies of the birth certificate and adoption papers on the coffee table. She pulled up to the driveway at 6:20, but waited until exactly 6:30 to ring the bell. I was in no hurry to answer it. Opening the door, I invited her in and then indicated where she should sit. I sat on the couch. She sat in the uncomfortable straight-back chair across from me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pacifier and held it out to her. She grabbed it and held it to her chest. "Thank you," she said as if I'd given her $1 million. Then I handed her a copy of the DNA test results. "You already know I'm not the father, but this will confirm it." She reached for the results and took them with her left hand. The pacifier remained clutched in her right. "I take it you are sample A?" she asked. "Yes." Then I pushed the rest of the papers toward her without saying anything. She leaned forward, read the title on the top sheet, and tears welled up in her eyes. She set the DNA test results aside and picked up the divorce petition. She started to read it, but the tears were already flowing freely and falling onto the form, so she set it aside. She searched through her pockets looking for a tissue but couldn't find one. "Can I have a tissue?" she asked. "I don't have any." That was a lie because there was a box on the nightstand by the couch where I was sitting. She saw them and just stared at me. I didn't move. "You're not making this easy for me, are you?" she asked. "You cheated," I said. She nodded. "How many times?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "No, I just want to know." "One weekend. One man. Who is he?" "Does it really matter?" "I think I deserve to know." "I'm not going to tell you." "Do I know him?" "I'm not going to tell you." "So you'd rather protect him than try to save your marriage?" She picked up the divorce petition. "Our marriage is over anyway. Why ruin someone else's life?" "Okay. But you have to tell me why you lied about your daughter being stillborn." It was a statement, not a question. "Yes, I owe you that." She stood up, pulled out a box of tissues, and placed it in front of her. She took one and wiped her still wet eyes. She was still clutching the pacifier. "When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't sure if it was your baby or his. I thought about getting an abortion, but I couldn't. Over time, I was able to convince myself that you couldn't know for sure if it was your baby or not. When we found out it was going to be a girl, I was even more sure you wouldn't know, because there's a special bond between fathers and daughters, and I was sure you and she would look alike. As the time of her birth approached, I started to get nervous. Maybe you would find out she wasn't yours. Then you went away on that project, and my nerves calmed down a bit. I was glad you wouldn't be around when she was born. Then you told me you were flying home, and I started to get nervous again. My emotions were on a roller coaster. Maybe you'll know, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be there when she's born, maybe you won't. I was nervous. Then she was there, alive and perfect. She was placed on my chest, and I looked at her and fell in love. She was beautiful. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. She paused. Blonde hair and blue eyes, just like her father's. You have brown hair and brown eyes. No one in our families has blonde hair and blue eyes. I knew she wasn't yours. She was my daughter and you were my husband. I loved you both, but I knew I had to choose between you. I chose you. The hospital staff helped me when I told them I wanted to give her up for adoption. Within 24 hours, I had the papers in my hands. They asked who the baby's father was, and I said I didn't know. They said it would be easier that way because if I knew who the father was, they would have to get his permission. I spent time with her, holding her in my arms. She was using a pacifier when they brought me the papers to sign. At this point, she started crying again. They took her away from me so I could sign. I signed and reached out to take her back. The nurse said, "You can't take her back. She's not yours anymore." I reached for her anyway but managed to grab the pacifier before they left with her. I never saw her again. The 2 pictures I managed to take with my phone, that pacifier, and her birth certificate are all I have of her now. She was sobbing. Lord, forgive me. I want my daughter back. I sat and watched her cry for a long time before I brought her a glass of water. Thank you, she said. I sat back down. Took her a long time to calm down. I knew I had to tell you something, so I made up the story that she was stillborn and had been cremated. When you came home, I couldn't believe you didn't ask to see the birth certificate, death certificate, or anything else. I still can't believe it. I trusted you, I said. I had no reason not to trust you. Besides, it was so traumatic that I saw no reason to add to our suffering by looking at those pieces of paper. She continued, eventually, you and I got our lives back to normal, and I was almost happy, but a part of me was missing. It still is, and it gets worse every year on her birthday. I always took the time to pull out her birth certificate, touch her little footprints, and hold her pacifier. There were times when I wanted to put it in my mouth to feel closer to her, but it had some of my dried breast milk on it, and I wanted to preserve it, so I didn't. At this point, she wanted to show it to me, but it was gone. They must have cleaned it off at the DNA lab. Oh my God, it's gone. She groaned, then looked at me. It's gone. Her milk is gone. You took away her milk. She fell to her knees and curled up on the floor. She wouldn't stop crying. I couldn't let her leave in that condition, so I helped her to the couch. I covered her with a blanket and went to my bedroom, though not to sleep. She remained there for several hours. At midnight, I heard the toilet flush. I went downstairs. She was sitting on the couch. Would you like some coffee? I asked. Yes, please. She sat down at the counter while I brewed a cup for her. She took a sip. I guess I got a little emotional, huh? Sort of. We sat in silence and drank coffee. More? I asked. Yes, please, she replied. Where are you staying? I asked, brewing 2 more cups. At the motel. You were there for more than 3 weeks? No, I was with my parents most of the time. Do they know the truth? No, I lied to them too. I told them that you and I were going through a difficult time and I needed to get away from you for a while. They paid for me to visit them. They think I came back to help sort out our difficulties. Where is your motel located? Just off the corporate campus. In fact, I should be there by now. She looked around, walked over to the coffee table, pulled a pen out of her purse, sat down, signed the divorce papers without reading them, and left. I put the coffee cups away and went upstairs to bed. When I woke up, it was mid-Sunday morning. I spent the rest of the day thinking. I took the divorce papers to my attorney on Monday, and he filed them. I went to the housing authority and told them I was moving out of executive housing and into an apartment in town. 6 months later, I was divorced. Neither the court nor I had heard from Catherine. As a result, she got nothing but her car and everything else she took. A copy of the final judgment was mailed to her parents' address in Pennsylvania. I've been thinking a lot about who Catherine cheated with. She never told me who he was or how the affair started. It wasn't just that she cheated and got pregnant that made me angry. It was that she defended him and wouldn't tell me who he was. The only thing she told me was that it happened one weekend. Fortunately, I was so busy at work that I didn't have time to think about anything else. I also didn't have time for a social life. There was one manager who worked with me that I became friends with, and I spent at least 1 night a week having dinner with him and his family. In my imagination, they were the perfect corporate family. Husband, wife, 2 kids, 2 cars, and a beautiful home. They had everything. Of course, being a corporate family, they had to move periodically, uproot their kids from one school and put them in another, and face all the other challenges of corporate life. Civilian families tend to grow up in the same neighborhood with the same friends over time, but there are exceptions. Families in some industries, such as oil and gas, move as often or even more often than corporate families. Anyway, Regional Manager James Watson and his wife Linda seemed perfect, and I loved spending time with them and playing with their children. The son was 10 years old and the daughter was 8. I don't know what typical children are like, but these two seemed well adjusted, so I decided they were typical. James and I were talking one night after dinner. Temporary assignments came up, and we discussed their pros and cons. Of course, they were necessary and we knew it, but most business trips took us away from our families, those of us who had them, and we felt we spent enough time away from them without counting the business trips. This topic came up because he was selected to attend a 2-week energy security seminar in Denver. He was scheduled to leave in 2 weeks. The next day, I went to see our supervisor. "Sir, is there any reason I can't go to the seminar instead of James Watson?" "Not really. The general manager just figured he had a little more experience in the field than you, but if you go, it'll work out well. He and his wife will be celebrating their 12th wedding anniversary, and it would be nice if they celebrated it together." "Well, Marcus Thompson, I didn't know you were a romantic," he said, laughing. 2 weeks later, I was back in Denver where Catherine and I were living when her daughter was born. Usually corporate seminars are pretty intensive, but this one was relaxed. We were divided into groups of 3 to work on a project. It turned out that there were 6 groups of 3, and there were 2 left over. That was the specialist from Alaska and myself. We developed a close friendship almost immediately. Seemed like we'd known each other all our lives. His name was Robert Mitchell, and as I said, he was based in Alaska at the Fairbanks Operations Center, the most remote facility in our company's network, but he loved it there. He was a systems engineer, and we were so far ahead of everyone else that we had to slow down and wait for them to catch up. On Friday of the first week, we had lunch at the executive club. He told me about his personal life. He cheated on his wife, and she divorced him. She was now living with some civilian, and his 2 children called the other man Daddy. Of all the painful things divorce brings, I always thought it was the hardest to bear when your kids call another man Daddy. Toward the end of lunch, I shared my story too. When I finished, he had a strange look in his eyes. "And you don't know who the man she had an affair with is?" "No, she wouldn't tell me." "And that was here in Denver?" "Yes, 5 years ago. Almost 6 now. Blonde hair and blue eyes?" "That's what she said. Come with me." We went to the Corporate Human Resources Center. Everyone assigned to the Denver facility had to check in through it. We walked right into the HR director's office. She saw us, stood up, and went around her desk to give Robert a hug. She looked to be about 60 years old and had a sparkle in her eyes. I liked her immediately, and I hadn't even spoken to her yet. "Aunt Margaret, this is Marcus Thompson." "Hi, Marcus," she said, shaking my hand. "Hello, The nameplate on her desk read, Mrs. Collins. "Mrs. Collins," I began. "Call me Aunt Margaret. Everyone does." "Aunt Margaret," began Robert. "Do you remember the fair-haired, blue-eyed contractor who may have been here about 6 years ago?" She thought for a few seconds. "No, but I don't always see everyone who passes through here. They all have to check in, but that doesn't mean I see them." She thought some more. "Marcus Thompson, you were here around that time, weren't you?" "I remember that name." "Yes, my wife and I were here." I said that. I looked at Robert as if asking how she remembered that. Robert looked at me. "Aunt Margaret has HSAM, and she can remember just about anything she's read, seen, or been involved with. That includes people. She can remember everyone she's ever met." "HSAM?" I asked. "Yes, highly superior autobiographical memory. It's a condition or a curse," Aunt Margaret interrupted. "Or a curse," Robert continued. "Very few people have it. Aunt Margaret is our institutional memory, especially when it comes to personnel matters. Isn't that right, Aunt Margaret?" Unfortunately, I looked at her, then at Robert, then back at her. "You remember everything? Everything that happens to me personally." "Jesus," I said. "How do you have room for all this?" "We don't know. It's just always there." "Does it have any downsides?" I asked. Oh God, yes. I remember the good as well as the bad. It can cause depression if you allow yourself to dwell on it. I can only imagine, I told her. Aunt Margaret, Robert interrupted again. Marcus, he pointed at me, is looking for someone who was here at the same time. The only thing he knows about him is that he was blonde with blue eyes. She laughed. That's it? No height, no weight, no position, no department, not even his initials. No, ma'am, I said. Calling me ma'am is a waste of good oxygen, Marcus. I'm Aunt Margaret. Give me time to think and maybe ask around. Does it matter? Robert looked at me and I answered. Yes, Aunt Margaret, it's important. Oh, he was about the same age as me when I was here, if that helps. And he was working in some kind of municipal capacity. Company employee or contractor. I suppose he was a contractor if he was working municipal projects. So you don't even know if he was company staff or outside contractor? No, I don't. Or a government liaison. No, I'm sorry. I know it's not much to go on. She laughed. Yeah, there's just nothing to target. There can't be more than 2,000 blonde-haired, blue-eyed men I've encountered in the last few years, but I'll see if I can narrow down the time frame. She took both of our phone numbers. 2 days later, she called Robert. I've been thinking about the man you asked about. I don't remember any blonde-haired and blue-eyed company employees, either engineers or technicians, who were about the right age, but I know 2 contractors who work for the Municipal Water Authority. One has worked there for about 30 years, so he's probably too old. The other has been working there for about 10 years. He's in charge of new construction now, but he used to be the head of the infrastructure department. His name is Kurt Weber. There are about 15 other blue-eyed blondes in the area, but the ages don't fit, and I didn't bother trying to remember civilians living off-site because I assumed that when Marcus was here, he didn't have time to make many civilian friends. Robert told me, and I immediately started planning how to meet Weber, find out if he was the right man, and maybe get some justice. The men who prey on the wives of our corporate personnel are the second lowest form of life on the planet. The lowest, of course, are those who prey on wives when the husband is overseas. These people deserve the worst fate imaginable. As I said, Robert could almost read my mind. Let's take a look at this guy, he said. The first thing he did was call Aunt Margaret. Is there any legal way to get Weber's address and phone number? Of course, she said. I have a contractor directory in my desk. 30 seconds later, we had both pieces of information. I love you, Aunt Margaret, Robert told her. We got into his rental car, and at 3:45 p.m., we waited outside the main office of the Municipal Water Authority. We recognized him immediately when he came out of the building. He was a good-looking guy, and I despised him at first sight. He headed to his car, and we followed him to make sure he was on his way home. We sat within sight of his house for a couple of hours. He never came out, but someone we assumed was his wife was working in the garden, and 3 kids, all with blonde hair, were playing around the yard. You don't have to stay here and do this, I told Robert. Hell, this is interesting. I'm sitting here wondering what we can do with this guy. I have some ideas. We compared notes the next morning. I was sitting on the next street over from Weber's house in my rental car. I was hoping he was going golfing or doing some home improvement, so maybe he was on his way to the local hardware or lumber store. I had been sitting there for almost 2 hours when I saw his car pull out of the garage and drive down the street. Thank God, I thought. I didn't feel like sitting here all day to see if he'd gone somewhere, but I was willing to do it if I had to. I followed him to the Home Depot. We parked and I followed him into the store. He was obviously well known there because he talked to a few of the employees. There was a spot right in front of the door where there was a coffee station. I knew enough about Home Depot to know that their regular contractor customers could help themselves. Weber helped himself and stood sipping his drink while he chatted with one of the salesmen behind the counter. Watching Mr. Weber, I realized one thing. Not only did he have an affair with my wife and get her pregnant, but he chewed gum with his mouth open. Other than spitting on the sidewalk, I couldn't think of anything more disgusting. The clerk Weber was chatting with had to go help a customer. So Weber took one last sip of coffee, spit the gum into a paper cup, and walked away, unwrapping another piece of gum. I walked over to the trash can, looked in it, and saw right on top a paper coffee cup with a piece of gum in it. I looked around, didn't see anyone, and took the cup. I got in the car and called Robert. I told him what I had. He laughed and told me to hurry back, that he might have something bigger by the time I got there. When I approached, he was literally jumping around and waving some papers. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "You really won't believe it." He grabbed my arm. "Look at this." "No, you better sit down." I did. He sat down next to me and put the papers in front of me. "Now look." There were a few names and an address, so I asked, "So what?" "That's Hope's name, address, and her family's name. Her name is Emily now. Emily Sullivan." I hacked into the files of an adoption agency. Those files are encrypted better than financial security systems, but then he stopped and calmed down. "Well, I didn't personally hack their files. My brother did, but it's the same thing." I started to laugh. "That's great, Robert, but what exactly am I going to do with it?" "I have no idea, but you have them. Maybe we can pressure someone." "Oh, that's great. I can already see the headlines. 2 energy executives try to blackmail 6-year-old foster child." "That's a great one." He tossed the papers on the coffee table and leaned back in his chair. "Yes, I see where you're going with this." He got a little frustrated again. "But we cracked their defenses. That's something." "Yeah, that's something," I said, laughing. I carried the papers and coffee cup back to my hotel room and placed them on the desk. I have no idea why I did it, but I looked up the address where Hope lived and drove there early Sunday morning. It was almost 200 miles to Colorado Springs. The house was a typical suburban house. I sat outside for about an hour, observing American suburbia on a typical Sunday morning. The noise of a few lawnmowers, the screams of children, and the chatter of neighbors. No activity came from Hope's house until almost noon. A car pulled into the driveway. There were 3 people in the car. A man was driving, a woman was in the front passenger seat, and a child was in the right rear seat. The woman got out of the car, closed her door, and reached for the right rear door. I was ready with my cell phone. The woman removed the child from the car seat and placed the child on the ground, then knelt down to straighten the child's dress. I had just enough time to take a few pictures. I heard a noise next to my car. A woman and a child were walking by. "Emily!" The child next to my car called out, and she ran toward another child who I realized was Hope, and ran toward her. They were only a few feet away from my car, and I took a few more quick pictures. I started my car and drove off before either of the 2 women became interested in the strange car and man parked on their street. I drove a short distance away and stopped to look at the pictures, for were absolutely perfect. I could even make out her blue eyes. I drove back to Denver. The following week, Robert and I finished the course with ease. We graduated on Friday and then had dinner and a few drinks together. Saturday morning, we went to the airport and flew home. Robert to Alaska and me to Milwaukee. The following Monday was a company holiday, so I had the day off. I took Catherine's and Hope's DNA reports to the DNA testing center. Patricia didn't remember me until I reminded her about the pacifier. I gave her Catherine's and Hope's DNA results and handed her a coffee cup with gum. "See you in 3 weeks," I said as I left. In fact, it only took 2 this time. She gave me the results over the phone. "It's a match, no doubt," she said. "Mother, father, and child." She would send me the official results in the mail. Okay, I had all the information I needed, but what was it for? What was I going to do with it all? It did confirm that Weber was in fact the guy Catherine had cheated with. Took me a week to take the first step. I went to Walmart and bought paper and envelopes. I also made copies of 2 photographs of Hope and the DNA reports belonging to Weber, Catherine, and Hope. On the DNA reports, I cut off anything that could tell where the report came from. I put it all in an envelope. I made sure I had gloves on from the moment I opened the bag of paper and the box of envelopes, made copies of the photos and DNA reports. I even used self-adhesive stamps, not saliva, to seal the envelope. I made every effort to keep it untraceable. I addressed it to Mrs. Kurt Weber at their home address. I also included Catherine's name and her parents' address because I had no idea where she was. Then I drove to Denver's main post office and dropped the letter in the mailbox. I had no idea what would happen in Colorado Springs when the package arrived. I certainly hoped the package would go to Mrs. Weber and not Mr. Weber. However, I knew what I wanted. I wanted Mrs. Weber to confront him and then make his life miserable. I felt sorry for the 3 children I saw, assuming they were his, and of course Mrs. Weber, but nothing was too bad for Weber himself. He deserved whatever was coming to him. The news from Colorado Springs came a little over a month later when I got a call from Aunt Margaret. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer," she said. "I'll do my best." "Doing your best isn't good enough. I need complete honesty. Is that what you and Robert did to Weber?" "Aunt Margaret, I don't mean to sound evasive, but what did we do to him?" "Set him up so his wife would file for divorce." "Okay, here's what I did. Robert had nothing to do with it. I told her the truth. Most of it, anyway. I omitted Robert's part. I figured if anyone was going to get in trouble, it would be me. You certainly stirred up a hornet's nest. Apparently, when his wife received your package, she didn't know if your DNA was his or someone else's, so she did it herself. She took some of his DNA and sent it off for processing. She also sent the profiles of that woman and the baby. They matched, and that's where it all went downhill." "Who was the woman he was having an affair with?" "She was my wife, Aunt Margaret." "Oh, Jesus. I thought it might be something like that." "Well, he was brought into the office yesterday, and he's not happy. He was ranting and raving all over the place." "Good. Hearing that his marriage is over is the best news I've heard in a while. I just feel sorry for his family. It was over for me. Catherine and I were divorced, and Weber was on the road to divorce. I folded all the papers Robert had given me into a folder and put it in a box with other things I no longer needed but kept anyway. My life was moving on. Over the next few months, I went on a couple of dates, but nothing significant happened. I still spent a lot of time with James Watson and his wife Linda. I lived in an apartment and occasionally took them out to dinner, but often had dinner at their house and spent more than one night on their couch. I had 1 more year of service left in Milwaukee and was considering buying a house, but the company had other ideas. They sent me to the executive management program at Northwestern University in Chicago. I was there for almost a year. There were a lot of socializing opportunities there if you were married or if you had a significant other. Otherwise, the choices were pretty limited. It was a long but interesting year. After graduation, I returned to Denver. I was surprised because I expected to be sent overseas like 90% of my classmates. Once in Denver, I found myself in Aunt Margaret's office. "How did you get back here?" she asked. "I have no idea." "Yes," came a voice from the past. It was newly promoted senior manager Robert Mitchell. He walked into the office, closed the door, and we shook hands. It turned out I needed an assistant, and a manager who had just graduated from the executive program was just what I needed, so I requested him. Robert and I had talked a few times since we met at the seminar, but hadn't seen each other. I was glad to see my friend. After checking in, I took a vacation for 2 weeks. The first thing I did was look for a house. Catherine and I had been saving up to buy one. I assumed that she would get half of it in the divorce, but since she didn't show up in court, I got everything. I went to the First National Bank of Colorado branch in Denver and opened an account. I also arranged to have my money transferred to that bank. I told the employee helping me that I also needed to find a house. Just as I said this, the branch manager walked by. He introduced himself as Michael Sullivan. "We moved here about 6 months ago and settled in a brand new neighborhood. The houses are very nice and affordable. You get a lot of value for your money, he told me. Then he went to his office and returned with a business card from the agent whose services he had used. I decided that if she was good enough for a bank branch manager, she was good enough for me. I called her, and it only took me 3 days to find what I wanted. I paid more than half of the down payment, and the bank was happy to finance the rest. I started working with Robert and moved into my new house. The first things I bought were a bed, a chair, a big TV, and a lawnmower. I was spending my first night in my new house. It was already dark outside, and I had no curtains or drapes. There weren't even enough sheets to cover the big front window. I had just opened a beer and was holding a slice of pepperoni pizza in my hand when the doorbell rang. I had long since gotten off the no red meat diet Catherine had kept me on. I opened the door, and there stood a woman. "Hi, neighbor," she said. "My name is Rebecca Sullivan, but everyone calls me Becca. We live in the neighborhood. We haven't lived here long ourselves, and I just wanted to say hello, introduce myself, and tell you that if you need anything, just ask. Is your wife here?" I smiled. "Marcus Thompson. No wife. Divorced." I saw her frown, but then she said, "Don't worry. I don't throw loud wild parties or even soft wild parties." She smiled. We chatted for a few more minutes before she left. The first week in my new home flew by. On Saturday morning, 3 women rang the doorbell and brought food. They also brought decorating ideas. They had seen my empty house with the lights on at night as I sat in it with nothing but a chair, TV, beer, and pizza. They decided it was time to help me. The ringleader was Becca Sullivan. A couple of hours later, I had a slightly worn but nice leather couch, a dining table and chairs, and a small coffee table to keep the pizza off the floor. The ladies were about to leave when 3 small children came running in, chasing each other. One of the ladies, Ruth, grabbed 2 of them and Becca grabbed the third. "Calm down, Emily," she said. She knelt down beside the child and brushed her blonde hair away from her blue eyes. "This is our new neighbor, Mr. Thompson." "Hello," she said confidently. "My name is Emily." I leaned over. "Hi, Emily," I said, looking into her piercing blue eyes. Blonde hair and blue eyes. I shook my head. "How old are you, Emily?" "I'll be 7 soon." I stood up and we all said our goodbyes. As soon as they left, I went to the room that was to be my den, found the right box, opened it and pulled out a folder. In it were the pictures I had taken. It was the same child. I hadn't paid attention to the names of the foster parents before, but now I did. The adoption papers named Michael and Rebecca Sullivan as Hope's adoptive parents. I literally fell on my backside and just sat there. What were the odds? He was assistant manager of another bank branch in Colorado Springs, and then he was promoted and transferred to Denver. It was incredibly strange. No computer could calculate the probability of this happening. Becca and her friends mostly decorated my house. Took a few weeks, and when it was done, we had a neighborhood open house. Becca invited her sister-in-law, Nicole Parker, who happened to be divorced. I hadn't enjoyed female companionship in a long time. Nicole and I hit it off right away. She was the last to leave the party, and I couldn't wait to call her the next day. We met for lunch and had dinner with Michael, Becca, and Emily. Emily was quiet because she wanted to go play with her friends. Over the next few months, we were together as often as possible. The first night we spent together was wonderful. We were sitting at the kitchen island when the doorbell rang. I put on my robe and went to answer it. It was Becca. "Good afternoon, Marcus," she said as she walked inside. "We were wondering." She saw Nicole. "Well, what do we have here?" she asked, heading toward her sister-in-law. Nicole was sitting on a stool eating a ham and cheese sandwich. As Becca approached her, she set the sandwich aside and turned to face her sister-in-law. Her robe was open, and Becca reached up to close it. Nicole laughed. "Too late for modesty, sis. He's already seen everything." "Spare me the details," Becca said. Anyway, we were wondering if you, Marcus, and since you're here, you, Nicole, wanted to go to the mall. Marcus, I know you still need a few things for the house. Yeah, like that awful bedspread. Nicole added. What's wrong with the bedspread? I picked it out myself. That's what's wrong with it? Said Nicole, getting up and kissing Becca on the cheek. I left the room and went upstairs to get dressed. When I came back, they were still discussing my bedspread. When they saw that I was dressed, they fell silent. We'd love to go to the mall, I said, if we can get Nicole dressed. A few minutes later, she came downstairs in the clothes she had worn to dinner last night. If this keeps up, I'll have to leave clothes here. I can't go shopping in clothes like this. You can today, I said, pushing her out of the house. Michael was as surprised as Becca to see his sister walking out of my house. Don't ask, Becca said. Michael and I sat in the front and the two women and Emily sat in the back. Nicole was reading a book to Emily, who was already asleep when we arrived at the mall. When we got back in the evening, I drove Nicole home. She invited me in for a nightcap and I accepted her offer. The following weekend, Michael and Becca asked Nicole to watch Emily while the two of them went out to dinner. We were in the backyard watching Emily in her sandbox. Without looking at Nicole, I said, "She's a beautiful child, isn't she?" "Yes, she is." "Did you know she was adopted?" "Really?" "Yes, they've had her since she was born." According to the adoption agency, the birth mother was married, had an affair with a man she doesn't even remember, and got pregnant. Her husband was in the corporate world. She didn't want him to find out about her affair, so she gave Emily up for adoption. Michael and Becca were there to take her home. Emily is the name her own mother gave her? No, that name was Hope. It's on the birth certificate, but Becca and Michael changed it. Emily suits her better. What happened to the birth mother and her husband? I have no idea. The adoption agency keeps their files very tightly sealed. They don't give the birth mother access to information about the adoptive family, and vice versa. Emily came over and wanted to sit on Nicole's lap. She leaned her head against Nicole's and fell asleep almost immediately. A few minutes later, Nicole asked me to carry Emily into the bedroom and put her to bed. It was my first time touching her, and I felt very uncomfortable. I gladly laid her down. 7 months later, Nicole moved in with me. A year after that, we were married. We had a very happy year until the company intervened. We were told we were being transferred to Germany for 3 years. We had 60 days to get there. One of the things the company does well is relocate people, and we were in the country with all of our possessions, including my car, within the allotted time. Germany is a beautiful country, and the area around Heidelberg is spectacular. Nicole had never traveled outside of the United States, so she enjoyed the adventures and traveling around Europe. One of the first things we did was buy a new car. She was thrilled racing down the autobahns as fast as she wanted in a car built for high speeds. We took 2 trips to the States. One when her father and Michael's father died, and the other was for a reunion. Both times, of course, we saw Michael and Becca. We saw Emily at the funeral, but when we went back for the reunion, she was at camp. I breathed a sigh of relief. Emily and I had never gotten along well. I guess some internal mechanism told us both that we weren't going to be friends. I was fine with that. I understood that she had no say in her birth and didn't know who her parents were. But in my mind, she was still the child of my ex-wife and her lover. Nicole and I had been trying to have children, but we just never succeeded. We also talked about adoption, but it never went very far. Robert and I remained friends and talked from time to time. He had remarried, and while Nicole and I were in Germany, he was assigned to Belgium, and we visited each other more than once. He and I discussed the fantastic turns of events that had led us to where we ended up, and he blamed it all on himself. If he hadn't gotten his brother to hack into the adoption agency, we wouldn't have known who or where Hope was. After 3 years, we received transfer orders to Richmond, Virginia. I was going as a new senior regional manager assigned to corporate headquarters as an operations director under the regional director. This was normally a position for a director, not a junior-senior regional manager, but I didn't mind. In the corporate world, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Nicole and I decided to live in company housing while we served there. Our house in Denver was rented out, and we decided to continue doing so. To help me get settled, they organized a series of briefings with the various departments that support the region. One of the briefings was to be given by municipal engineering representatives. The municipal engineer himself and representatives from his department were already in the conference room when I arrived. I sat down at the table and watched as a blue-eyed civilian stood up to begin his presentation. His hair was slightly blonde but with a touch of gray. He introduced himself as Kurt Weber. I just stared at him. He had been talking for an hour, and I hadn't heard a word, and my gaze never left his face. It was obvious that he was uncomfortable with me looking at him. At the end of his presentation, he asked if I had any questions. "Tell me, Mr. Weber, have you ever worked in Denver?" "Yes, sir. I was with the Municipal Water Authority there." "Did you like it there?" "Yes, sir." "Why did you leave?" "It's rather personal, sir." "You are correct. I withdraw the question. I just like to know about the people I work with. I seem to recall some personnel issues at the Denver Municipal Authority a few years ago. Do you know anything about that?" "I vaguely recall something about that. There was someone involved in some kind of personal matter, if I remember correctly." "Ah, well, I just remembered something. Thanks for the briefing. If you need anything from headquarters, feel free to contact me. Just in case you forgot," I pointed to the name badge on my jacket. "My name is Thompson. Cho MPSON. Marcus Thompson. I wouldn't want you to forget it." I was still looking straight into his eyes, and I could see the light bulb turn on and his eyes get huge. Kurt Weber became several different colors, ranging from red to pale gray. I got up and walked away. In the afternoon, I learned that Mr. Kurt Weber had requested a transfer. Unfortunately for him, this request had to go through me. When I received it the next day, I wrote in large letters response and added a handwritten note. "I have plans that involve Mr. Weber's expertise. He will play a key role in the realization of these plans." The next day, to the surprise of almost everyone, Mr. Kurt Weber tendered his immediate resignation. I approved it. Every day, I fell more and more in love with Nicole. I watched her get more and more beautiful and vibrant every morning. I looked in the mirror and all I saw was an aging middle-aged man, and I wondered what she saw in me. But whatever it was, I was grateful for it. We enjoyed our time together, and time in the form of years flew by quickly, much faster than I wanted it to. We were transferred to Alaska and took a vacation to visit Becca and Michael in Denver. On our first evening, they engaged us in a decision they had made with Emily, who was now almost 18 years old. She had known from the beginning that she was adopted, but was now interested in trying to find her biological parents. Michael and Becca supported her decision, but the adoption agency gave them no help, saying they had to comply with the confidentiality laws. All we heard that first day was how outdated the laws were and that they needed to be reformed, especially considering how important it was for an adopted child to know the health status of the birth parents. They decided to go to a website dedicated to DNA and ancestral origins, send Emily's DNA, and see what happens. Emily thought it would be nice to have her own mother come to her high school graduation, but since it was only a couple of weeks away, they decided that was unlikely. That night, Nicole and I were already in bed when she asked, "What are you going to do?" "About what?" "About Emily." "What about her?" "Come on, Marcus. Married couples don't have secrets, or shouldn't have any. I found your little file 6 months after we were married. She can avoid DNA testing if you tell them everything you know." "Oh," I said. "Yeah, oh. Why have you been silent all these years?" "I'm not sure. I guess I knew how sensitive you'd be about it, and Michael and Becca didn't need to know, so I kept quiet. But now it's become important and you have to address it. Any suggestions on how I can do this?" "Just tell the story, I suppose." How do you think they'll take it? Michael is my brother and just like me, so he'll take it normally. Becca is the wild card. Okay. Tomorrow we'll get Emily out of the house and tell them. She leaned over and kissed me gently. Do I ever bore you? She asked. What a silly question, I said. Of course not. Why did you even ask that? Because you haven't touched me all day. I grinned and reached for the buttons on her pajamas. I can fix that right now. The next morning was Sunday. Emily was picked up by her best friend, and they went to the mall. I gathered the four of us around the table, took a deep breath, and began. I started by telling them that Nicole and I had packed our things before we went downstairs, so we were ready if they wanted to kick us out. They looked at us, and Nicole shrugged. Emily doesn't need to give DNA to find her biological parents. I know who they are, I said. The looks I got from both of them told me it was best to explain myself, so I told them the whole story. When I finished, I took a deep breath and looked around the table. Michael was just staring at me, and Becca had tears in her eyes. After a few seconds, she stood up, walked over to me, took my hands, pulled me to her, and hugged me. Oh, poor guy, living with that all these years and not being able to talk about it. No one deserves that. She hugged me again. What do you think, Michael? She asked her husband. I'm trying to calculate the probability of how we all ended up together. I don't think there's a big enough number. So what do we do now? Asked Becca, returning to her chair. I think Marcus should contact his ex-wife and invite her to the graduation since Emily wants her there, Nicole said. Why me? I protested. Because you started it? Michael grinned. But who's going to contact Weber? Not me, I said, and told them about the last time I saw him. You never told me that, Nicole said. I didn't realize you knew the whole story then. She leaned over and kissed me. I love this woman, I thought. Later that day, when Emily returned, Michael and Becca told her about it. She was both nervous and excited and wanted us to continue. The only way I know of to contact Catherine is through her parents, if they're still alive and if they still live in Pittsburgh, and if they still have a landline. I waited until Monday morning and talked to a private investigator. I asked him to help me find Catherine's parents and Kurt Weber. Took him 2 hours to get the parents' phone number. Took longer for Weber. I called Catherine's parents, reminded them who I was, and told them I needed to talk to Catherine. I gave them my phone number to give to her. Not an hour later, my phone rang. Hello, this is Catherine Bowman. I was given this number. Hi, Catherine. It's Marcus. Yeah, how's it going? I asked, trying to think of something clever to say, but I couldn't. Actually, I'm doing great. How are you? Very well, Catherine. I need to talk to you about something very important. Okay, go ahead. Not over the phone. Tell me where we can meet, and we'll talk in person. Explain it to me. We haven't spoken in years, and suddenly out of the blue, you have something so important that it needs to be discussed in person. That's it. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm not buying it. Okay? But remember, I gave you a chance. A chance at what? Come on, Catherine, what's the matter? Only in person, Catherine. Call me if you change your mind. Wait. Okay, damn it. We live in Vegas. That's better. I'm flying out there tomorrow, and I'll call you when I land. You decide where you want to meet. The next day, we met in the lobby of the Bellagio Hotel. I guess she needed a lot of witnesses. Hi, Catherine. Hello, Marcus. This is my husband, Christopher. Christopher Bowman. Hi, Christopher. I turned my attention back to Catherine. I need to see you alone. For 10 seconds. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Christopher. Whatever you say. But this is about the hope you had. She turned pale. Can we still talk? Yes, he knows about her. Okay. Let's sit down. We found as quiet a corner as we could, given where we were. I recommend something to drink. Wine will do. We agreed on a red and I ordered it. Let's wait while we get some poured into our glasses. I paid for the wine and we all took a sip. Her name is Emily. She's graduating in 2 weeks and would like you to be there. Christopher and I watched her faint with a glass of wine in her hand without spilling a drop. Christopher took the glass from her, set it down, and patted her cheeks until she regained consciousness. What did you say? I repeated it. Then I pulled out the picture of Emily and showed it to Catherine. She began to cry, touching the picture as gently as she could. She's beautiful. Where did you get this? I took a picture of her yesterday in her living room. You took it? How? Why? I told her the whole story from beginning to end. I even told her that we had tried to find Kurt Weber to invite him, but he seemed to have disappeared. She didn't realize I knew his name and was shocked a second time. She was stunned at first, but then she got angry. Really angry. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you keep her from me all these years? Her voice grew louder and louder. Christopher jumped up. Calm down, calm down. You gave up all rights to her. Marcus is breaking the law by doing what he's doing now, so chill out. She calmed down. When can I see her? At her graduation, if you want to come. Of course I'll come. Can I see her sooner? You both need time to get used to it. Take your time. How about we get there the day before? She smiled. That would be wonderful. Now, how about I take a picture of you, so she can see what you look like? Okay. We found a spot outside for her to pose. When I started to leave, she rushed over to me, hugged me, and started kissing me all over my face and head. Not too demonstrative, is it? Asked Christopher, laughing. I decided I liked him. That same afternoon, I flew back to prepare Emily. I showed her a picture of Catherine. She's beautiful, Emily said. She was very nervous but excited at the same time. For the first time since I'd known her, she hugged me. Thank you, Uncle Marcus. Now we know where you get your beauty, said Becca, holding Emily tightly against her. Do you know what my birth father looks like? Emily asked timidly. The other 3 adults looked at me with widened eyes, waiting to see what I would say. I thought for a second before I spoke. Let me tell you that you got your blonde hair and blue eyes from him. The 3 adults breathed a sigh of relief. We had only taken a week's vacation, so I had to go back to Alaska, but Nicole stayed behind to help everyone prepare for the big day. I left for Alaska, promising to be back 2 days before graduation. The day before I was due back in Denver, I got a call from a private detective. The most he'd been able to find out about Weber was that after leaving government service, he'd taken a job as a consultant to the government of a Middle Eastern country. Like several other American consultants, he disappeared shortly after arriving in the country and has not been seen since. I met Catherine and Christopher at the airport and drove them straight to Emily's house. When we entered, she was standing in the middle of the living room. I let Catherine go first. They looked at each other for a long time. Then Catherine spoke. I brought you this, she said, pulling out a pacifier. It belongs to you, and I thought you might want it back. Emily walked over to her slowly, took the pacifier, and held it in her hands. Was this really mine? Yes, you used it when you were a baby. Emily looked up at Catherine. Are you really my mother? Yes, I am. Emily stepped forward and hugged her. I've wondered about you my whole life. They held each other for a long time, both crying. The rest of us just watched, most of us with tears in our eyes too. Finally, Emily stepped back. Why did you give me up? Catherine looked around the room at all of us, then back at Emily. It's a long story, sweetheart. But the most important thing you need to know is that I loved you then, and I love you now. I gave you up because I thought it was best for you, not because I didn't want you. Can you tell me about my father? Catherine glanced at me, then back at Emily. Your father he was someone I knew briefly. He doesn't know about you. He has blonde hair and blue eyes, just like you. You're beautiful, just like he was. Emily nodded. Will I ever meet him? I don't know, honey. Maybe someday. Becca stepped forward. Emily, why don't you show Catherine your room? And you two can talk more privately? Emily took Catherine's hand and led her upstairs. The rest of us sat in the living room, not quite sure what to say. Christopher broke the silence. This is incredible. I've watched Catherine suffer for years, wondering about her daughter. She never got over giving her up. How long have you two been married? Nicole asked. 3 years. I knew about Emily from the beginning. Catherine told me everything. She's lucky to have you, Michael said. I'm the lucky one, Christopher replied. After about an hour, Catherine and Emily came back downstairs, both looking much more relaxed. We've been talking, Emily said. Catherine is going to stay for graduation, and then we're going to keep in touch. Maybe I can visit her in Vegas sometime. That would be wonderful, Catherine said, still holding Emily's hand. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. Emily looked radiant in her cap and gown. When they called her name, Catherine stood up and cheered louder than anyone. You could see the pride and love on her face. After the ceremony, we all went out to dinner. Emily sat between Catherine and Becca, and you could see she was trying to navigate having 2 mothers. But both women handled it with grace, understanding that they each had a special place in Emily's life. That evening, as Catherine and Christopher were preparing to leave, Emily ran up to Catherine and hugged her tightly. Thank you for coming, she said. This was the best graduation present ever. Thank you for wanting me here, Catherine replied. I love you so much. I love you too, Mom. It was the first time Emily had called her that, and Catherine burst into tears again as we stood in the driveway watching them drive away. Nicole took my hand. You did a good thing, Marcus, she said. I think so too, Becca added. Emily has her whole family now. Michael nodded. It's funny how things work out sometimes. I looked at Emily, who was still waving at the disappearing car. How do you feel, kiddo? She turned to me with a big smile. Complete, she said. For the first time in my life, I feel complete. And in that moment, I realized that I felt complete too. The anger and pain that had consumed me for so many years had finally been replaced by something better. The satisfaction of knowing that I had helped bring a family back together. The truth had been painful, and the journey had been difficult, but in the end, it had led to healing and love. Emily had her mother back, Catherine had her daughter, and I had found peace with the past. Sometimes the most broken things can be made whole again, if you're willing to do the hard work of putting the pieces back together. And sometimes, the very thing that seems like it will destroy you becomes the thing that sets you free. As we walked back into the house, Nicole squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered. And for the first time in a very long time, I was proud of myself too. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.